If you really want to get better at playing fast on the guitar, there is absolutely no reason to overcomplicate things. So today, I'm going to be taking you all through a really simple, efficient, but effective practice routine that is absolutely going to help you refine this skill, playing faster. It's 15 minutes, 5 exercises, so there's some solid variety inside of these exercises, and I think if you really do want to refine the skill, 15 minutes isn't too big of an ask, all right? So grab your guitar and let's jump in. What's up, guitar players? My name's Guthrie with Easy Guitar Practice, and like I just said, we're gonna be going over a really great routine to help you all get fast on this beautiful instrument. And as you just saw, I shared a clip of myself, trying to play fast. And the reason I did that is when we get into these exercises, you want to be really methodical. All right. So you don't want to push the pace to a place where you're making mistakes and there's blemishes and errors and things like that, because that's just going to translate into sloppy playing. So you'll be trying to play fast, but you'll be making errors and it's going to sound fragmented and choppy because of those errors. And then you won't actually be playing fast. You'll just be another person, right? One of millions of people who, when they try to play fast, are just playing messy. All right, so really tune into yourself, what feels appropriate for you when you're turning on the metronome, things like that, all right? And if you didn't see the recent interview, although I'm dating this video, the recent interview with Flea on Rick Beato's channel, Flea talks a lot about, warming up and making sure all the little muscles in his fingers are warmed up. So that's definitely a part of what we're trying to do today. Get all these muscle fibers turned on, because just like the person going to the gym, if you're trying to, squat and bench and deadlift hundreds and hundreds of pounds on your first day, it's not going to happen, right? You have to build up that skill. Same thing here. You can't just jump into all your favorite songs. You want to, that are really fast, you want to actually acquire and accumulate the skill of playing fast, right? So that's what this session is all about. And with that, all right, enough context, enough of the spiel. Let's jump in, all right? But I did just want to give you all some context. So the first exercise is based around a very small piece of the G major scale, all right? So we're going to start in thirds, and I'll just play it really slow for you all. And of course, you have the tabs up on the screen. We restart, right? Once we come back to the 9th fret on the D string, we restart. You can play along with me if you'd like. We'll just go through that a few more times. So not super fancy or sexy or anything like that. You'll notice, right, on the D string, we're going index, middle, pinky, and on the G string, we're going index, ring, pinky. All right, so we're getting every finger moving, but it's also forcing us to tune in to our alternate picking, all right, because there's that thirds going on. We're playing up in thirds, right? We have to sync up picking and fretting hand. And as we're changing strings, right, as we come back down, right, we don't just go right back down. We come back to the G for a second and then come back down to the D. Now, my recommendation, I want to be quick on these exercises and not, beat you to death with them. Set a 3-minute timer. Like I said, it's a 15-minute session, but you have to set the timer to make that happen, all right? So just 3 minutes on this exercise, slow enough where you're not making any mistakes. If it feels way, way good, maybe you get through like 10 cycles and you're like, all right, I haven't made a single mistake. That's where you can bump things up. Don't bump it up by 10 BPM, 20 BPM, 2, 4, 5, right? Gradual, and get to that place where you're like, all right, I'm making some mistakes, and then bring it down a few. but a metronome is key. All right, so you can, get some rhythmic context with all of these exercises. I think that's really, really important. All right, so again, slow, methodical. That's the last time I'll say it. You know what to do. Set the 3-minute timer, and then we can move on to exercise 2. I will say in the description, really quick, there is a downloadable PDF with all of these exercises. It's a simple Google Drive link. I don't need your email. I'm not going to spam you with emails of various courses that are coming out. Download that so that you don't have to come back to this video every single time you want to practice this routine, all right? You'll have that for life, and you can bring this into your routine based on how you're feeling. If there's an exercise here that you really like above all of the other ones, you can just take that and maybe use it for 5 minutes inside of a routine you're creating for yourself, okay? But make sure you download that, and let's move on to exercise 2. All right, for this exercise, we're descending from the high E to the D string in the Dorian scale. And don't worry if you're not familiar with the modes of the major scale. The way I like to think about this and conceptualize this is that it's the blues scale, right? So you could play this over a dominant blues in A, and it would sound really good. It would work with that progression, all right? But let's just go over it and move on and get you out of here. So the difference between this and the first exercise, that first exercise I feel like is just super cyclical, right? It kind of just one cycle flows into the next one. Whereas in this exercise, we have that specific break on the D string before we restart. So taking that alternate picking, bringing it across more strings, so rather than just 2 strings, the D and the G string, we're going from high E to D, all right, so 4 strings instead of 2. And you're gonna have to refine not being really big with your picking hand, being really accurate. So for those of you who are a little bit newer, you'll probably look at your picking hand, you'll probably look at your fretting hand, and that's totally fine. Remember, fast is slow, slow is fast. Be methodical. Now you'll hear just a little extra tidbit on that second hit on the G string on the 5th fret. I'm pulling down a little bit. All right, so just think about that as like the beginning of a vibrato. This gives it a little extra bluesy flavor. But again, don't rush and go beyond your capacity so that there's blemishes. If you need to, that's totally fine, right? That pace is A-okay, but you want to make sure that you're playing things clearly and that they're ringing out and they sound really good. That's why I'm also on a clean tone, because you can really hear your blemishes. If things are so distorted that you're getting this outrageously grainy tone, you're not always going to hear your blemishes, or you'll think to yourself, oh, that's okay, the distortion kind of covered it up, all right? Well, when we're practicing, right, we want to be able to hear those things. So if you want to really hear that, right? That's very obvious when you're on a clean tone. I'm exaggerating, but a small blemish, you might say, oh, that's actually okay. And if you want to take it to the next level, film yourself, right? So often I'm like, man, I'm feeling good. And then if I'm recording myself, I look back and I'm like, ooh, there's some things I could have done differently. I think it's a great way to give yourself some feedback. So anyways, let's move on to exercise number 3. So in this exercise, we're going to start bringing in slides and hammer-ons. That is another important element to moving around the neck, playing fast, right? You don't want to just be relying on picking really fast. You also want to use those really simple techniques like slides, hammer-ons, and pull-offs to make your playing sound faster. All right, so here is the exercise. Again, playing slow, hear it out, sound it out, be methodical. Be slow before you speed things up. Again, metronome. If that feels great, go ahead, bump it up. But if you start making a lot of mistakes, back off a little bit. All right, really quick, when you're sliding in this kind of context, do not jam down on this fretboard, right? Do not overpress the string. just enough pressure to get it to ring out. So you can really slide in a smooth manner, as opposed to if you're pushing down too much, there's way too much friction. It's gonna get clunky after a while. Right, you cannot over choke this, okay? You want that to be really smooth, okay? Let's be quick. I know I've given you a lot of spiels throughout this lesson already, so let's move on to exercise number 4. So in this exercise, we're returning to a vertical pattern like we used in the second exercise, and we're also going to be in the key of A, or in A blues is the progression that this would layer perfectly over, and it's got a little bit of a Chuck Berry sound to it, although of course, when it comes to the blues, everyone's recycling everything, so a lot of artists use phrasing like this. But we're gonna go down and up. All right, so second exercise, we just went down from, high E to the D string. Now we're going to move from the G to high E, back down to the D. All right, kind of just a half step bend. Quick pull, quick hammer on. I do kind of like a small rake. I think that's the best way to go about things on the first 3 notes. Right, so all downstrokes, right, like you're doing a slow strum. And then up to you, you might want to come back to a downstroke, but I would just recommend trying to get right into alternate picking. Excuse the guitar faces, I always feel like I'm like mouth open as I'm going through these things, mouth breather. Right? Get into an alternate pick after you get those, 3 downstrokes. And again, that's why you're going to want to be slow so that you can feel things out, not just with your fretting hand and getting the notes right, but really making sure your technique on your picking hand is solid as well. All right, so one more time, really slow. And really applicable to your playing, especially, if you're a blues person like I am, super applicable to your playing. If you want to, have some faster runs, you like the Stevie Ray Vaughns, the Kenny Wayne Shepherds, the Artur Meneses of the world. And yeah, so I think that's a good one. And we'll finish off with another one that's applicable, and then you'll get on with your life. So exercise 5 coming up right now. So in this exercise, we're bringing back in some horizontal movement, but we are also shifting from the high E all the way to the low E. And it sounds like this. Let's play that a little bit cleaner. I think there can be some trickiness on that. The pull off from 5 to 3 on the low E, so just keep that in mind. But there's hammer-ons, there's sliding, and there's pull-offs. But see the blemish there on the low E, so if this was a true practice session, I'd go, wait a sec, slow that down. Better, right? And when you are playing fast, there is kind of a give and take, I will be honest. So that last rep, not, I think I could have cleaned up that pull off, from 5 to 3 on the low E. But, I can be honest with myself and say, if I was playing that, in a jam or something and I hit that, as a lead line, I think I'd feel okay with that. All right. But again, your decision. In a practice session, I probably would still pull back. But I wouldn't pull back a lot, maybe 2 BPM to 5 BPM. All right, so one more time. Alternate pick. Be aware of your picking hand. Don't just downstroke, okay? Be fluid. So important, all right? And if it sounds like you have some accidental dynamics, one string is way louder when you pick it, or your downstroke's louder than your upstroke, those are things you need to think about and dial in. Again, why it's so important to be slow, off the bat, and increase as you see fit, versus going in fast, making mistakes, and then those 3 minutes end, and you haven't even gotten in, 2 or 3 perfect cycles. It's all about making sure you're playing these reps and these licks and phrases perfectly. And once you're done with this, those muscle fibers, in your fretting hand, your picking hand should be in a great place. That mind muscle connection should be in a great place. And you can move on and not have to worry about these things as you kind of, slog your way through a song, right? You can actually have these things baked in. And then if you have a song where there's a fast solo, you don't have to be kind of dialing in these skills as you're learning the notes in that solo, if that makes sense. All right. So again, download the PDF so you have this for life. If you did find it helpful, of course, like and subscribe. It's super helpful for me. And I think I've got a lot of stuff out there already that's really solid. And of course, there will be a lot of good stuff in the future that is going to be really helpful as well. So thanks so much for stopping by, and happy playing to you all.